It was difficult to believe the launch day would actually happen until it was right here. Eric would like to think it started just like any other day, but it was nothing like that. To be fair, the surreal feeling made it easier to get through it all. At some point, the brain just didn't want to overthink it anymore and went into the sure I guess mode. Smooth sailing from then on. A few decades ago, this would not be possible, his mother said. They arrived on their given time and were now sitting in the grand waiting room. All around, people chattered, cried, laughed, trying to deal with the swarming emotions. Nimble automatons maneuvered between them, delivering little cups of water and handing out snacks. Eric couldn't shake the impression that it was an audition hall for some reality show or another. Imagine all the countries, cities, towns working in tandem. A difficult task indeed. As far as Eric knew, due to some technical mumbo-jumbo, the simulation had to be initialized for everyone at once. No letting people in one by one, having them pop up on a spawn point or some such. Thankfully, they could at least get prepared in waves, else he was sure the entire affair would go tits up. There was only so much order people could maintain. The organization was truly impressive though. Most people knew where to go, when to go there, and those who mixed things up were quickly scooped up by the authorities and delivered to their destination. The protests were few and far between, and those that did break out were dispersed within minutes. The police and the military were scheduled to check in last. His father nodded, poignant. Aye, technology. Eric tried to reposition himself on the chair in the waiting hall, but there was no way to making it comfortable, especially while hunching over his smart ring. Aye, technology. Are you absolutely sure you don't want to go Martian? He asked the little hologram of Sabrina. Nah, boy, shouldn't have made promises. Now it's time to get into them tights. Eric huffed at her, but smiled nonetheless. It was fine. Everything was fine, as long as she was there with him. I wish you were here with me, she said. I will be, very soon. I know, but I'm not terrified very soon. I'm terrified now. Sabrina had a heart defect, and as such she'd been assigned to a cardiological division, while Eric, healthy as a horse, had been relegated to a commoner one. She turned around. Someone was talking to her. She nodded a few times, then got back to Eric. I have to go, she said. My turn is soon. Eric, I love you. I love you too. See you soon on the other side. She nodded, but it was a frantic, jagged nod. Eric's heart hurt at the sight of her genuine fear. She was alone there, surrounded by strangers. And though today had been filled with uniting kindness and understanding coming from every angle, all he wanted was to be there with her and make her feel safe. With a sigh, he turned off the ring and turned to his parents. Grandpa was somewhere else too, in the area adjusted to the needs of seniors. Anxious, Eric? His mom placed her hand on his head for a brief moment. Anxious? I don't know. Horrified is more like it, I think. Say, don't you want to go medieval with us? His mother snorted, albeit with love. Absolutely not. I want my comforts, my running water, and my flealess blankets. I don't think they implemented fleas. What kind of medieval experience would it be without the fleas? The one you could live in for 5 years with no escape, Eric laughed. But man, I don't actually know for sure. What if there are fleas? Why couldn't Sabrina be a space nerd? I'm sure once we're back, the simulations will still be accessible. You'll get to see the Mars. Yeah, but they will probably cost an arm and a leg. And also, you can't stay there if you have to earn all those arms and legs, can you? This is the one freebie we get. Mother shrugged and shook her head. No one ever said love was easy. Eric rolled his eyes. He wanted compassion, maybe even some pity, and all he got were his mom's usual smug remarks. But she added, to be honest with you, I cannot wait. I thought there would be more doubt or fear, but it didn't come. Tell me your secret. No secret, it's just... I think it's a dream of mine coming true. I've always wanted to travel and explore the world, But most of the world was gone by the time I knew how to pack a bag, she said. She'd been around during the separation, but it had happened when she was 3 or 5, something like that. I want to see what Earth can become. I want to imagine we will be able to recover the world we've lost, immortalize the cultures that have disappeared, save those that may still be out there, begin moving forward once more, living, not surviving. Eric never understood why people kept saying they weren't truly living here. He liked his life, very much so. The world outside the borders was interesting, certainly, but it would already take him a lifetime and a half to discover everything the inside had to offer. To him, Project Hope was about preservation, not expansion. But it was nice that despite different goals and dreams, they all had one common path to follow. Sabrina lay down on the airflow mat, and one of the overseers was by her side in moments. She prepared the headband and the sensors, and then attached them to Sabrina. "Don't worry," she said, noticing Sabrina was shaking all over. "It will be like falling asleep." "I know, my dad has explained it to me. Over and over, actually." She laughed a shaky laugh. "I wonder what the world will look here, you know? So empty and quiet, I guess. Makes me think of a zombie apocalypse, a few % survivors in the wreckage of the world." The woman smiled. "But there's something to it, I suppose. But to be honest, in the case of a zombie apocalypse, I'd rather be in the horde." "What's why?" Sabrina laughed, an unexpected confession. "They got it easier, so much less stress." "I suppose they do. Do you think it will be very difficult here?" "It all depends on so many factors, I don't think anyone knows," the overseer said. "But the truth is, most people aren't necessary for our survival anymore. I believe we'll manage just fine." She was right. It felt like humanity was so close to building a utopia. After thousands of years, they've arrived at the point where people didn't have to toil to keep themselves alive anymore, where they could finally be truly free. If only the sky wasn't collapsing on their heads. "Whenever you're ready," the woman said. Just do it. You have so many others to take care of." Sabrina took a deep breath and closed her eyes. "Falling asleep, right? Just fall asleep." "Thanks for the chat, though," she whispered. "Made me die of fear a little less." Waking up brought a bout of nausea. Sabrina winced, holding back the urge to vomit. She lay flat down on her back, just as she'd fallen asleep in the real world. Her surroundings seemed oddly dark, but her eyelids felt too heavy to lift them and look around. Her chosen medieval spawn area was supposed to be placed in a fair in the middle of the day. Something must have changed? She forced her eyes open, and her body stiffened. She was in a huge, dark hall, barely lit by long and narrow blue lamps lining the ceiling. This was not Hope. She was back in the real world. But she didn't have a single memory from the simulation. The last thing she remembered was falling asleep here, and now she was awake, 5 years later? Did it malfunction? Did she forget everything that happened in her life over the past 5 years? No, please don't let it be that. Please let the memories return. The nausea got worse, and Sabrina turned to let out God's know what. She hadn't really eaten in so long. "Sabrina." It was her father's voice. He was on her other side. And no one else was waking up. Why? He put a hand on her shoulder and turned her around. "Take it easy," he said. He didn't look a day older. Even through her days, Sabrina managed to connect the dots. "You've woken me up," she said, though it was difficult to speak. Her throat felt half asleep still. "I had to. Come on, can you stand up?" You said I could make my decision. You said you agreed. Can I go back?" Sabrina raised her eyes to meet her father's. "Or is it done for me now?" "Oh God, Eric." Father grabbed her under her arms to help her up, but she jerked away with what power she had. "We have to go now. Come on, come on." His voice was shaky, and so were his hands. "What's happening?" "Let's go." "No, tell me what's happening." She grabbed onto one of his arms and sat up. Father bit his lower lip and shook his head. "I have a bad feeling," he whispered. "A bad feeling? Please, Sabrina, just come with me and I'll find a way to make it up to you. I swear on your mother's grave." "What is happening? What about Eric?" This time he grabbed her hands and pulled her up with force. "He'll be fine, I swear, but we must go." "Dad, I'm scared," Sabrina said, but her father didn't answer anymore. He pulled her along, passing by rows and rows of unconscious people. Thin wires coming from the headsets and the various sensors sprawled over them like cobwebs over long-forgotten corpses. The caretaker automatons had not even been deployed yet, still locked in their little chambers. They arrived at a small break room. "There's water in the cupboard," Father said. Sabrina turned around, thinking he'd finally talk to her properly, but instead, he shut the door in her face. The lock turned. "Dad? Dad, what the hell?" She struggled with the handle, but the door was truly locked. "I'll be back soon," he said from the other side, and before she could protest more, the rushed footsteps announced his departure. Sabrina was about ready to fall apart. Whatever piece she managed to find had been torn out of her and shredded to bits. Her mind rushed to the weirdest scenarios. Panic-induced insanity? Alien mind control? It would be a great time to strike if he thought about it. Normally it was easy to shut down such ideas with logic, but right now everything seemed possible, and Sabrina felt helpless in a way she'd never experienced before. Worse yet than when a blow to the spine had left her legs paralyzed in the middle of the street. Now it was her brain which could not carry her away to safety. The big TV on the wall was off. Would there still be news playing? All the anchors were asleep. She found the remote. Only one channel was live, the transmission from the Project Hope initialization. 5 professors sat by the table, talking in a calm manner. No screams, no panic. On top of the screen, a big box displayed countdown to the end of the preparation phase, the moment people will awaken inside the simulation. 26 minutes. Sabrina sat down in the very corner of the room, as if the walls could embrace her. What was she supposed to do? What could she do? Scream? Call for help? But what if it would get her father in trouble? Or what if they took her back in, but they put her in the vanilla realm, alone, because the configuration was reset or something? "I chose to stay," one woman on the TV said. "Many of us had the choice to go into Hope, but we understood that we can do more good here. It's an opportunity of a lifetime to make a difference." "No regrets?" "Not yet," she laughed. "Lyra often said we are at war for our home, though there is no enemy. This is humanity's last stand, and we will find a way to fix our mistakes." She was correct. The chatter of the scientists was calming. Nothing changed, nothing was going up in flames. Perhaps her father simply panicked, and for once in his life he failed to listen to reason. It would take a while to forgive him, but understanding it was the first step to that end. But wait, he'd asked her about Eric, hadn't he? She'd been so turned around it was difficult to remember, but yeah. Oh God, did he go to wake him up as well? That would be a crime. She turned on her ring and tried to call him. He did not answer. With access to the project database, David was able to find Eric in time. 6 minutes before the launch. After the boy's consciousness connected to the virtual world and his body began entering the suspended state, it would be impossible to wake him without running the readjustment program or risking damage. He ran out of the car and the vehicle wound down, its battery low. Most of them would not be recharged for years to come. David wasn't sure why he'd done this to his daughter. Was it the fear of the project going wrong? Some underlying irrational worry sown in him by Madeline? Or was it worse? A selfish fear of loneliness, the inability to let Sabrina go and live her life. Whatever it was, he would not be able to bear the guilt if he didn't bring Eric back for her. It had to be done, no matter the consequences. The room was already chilly. The energy-saving lights kept it barely lit, just enough to make sure, in the case of emergency, a rescue team could find their way around. On the daily basis, the caretaker automatons couldn't care less. David maneuvered between the rows of sleeping people until he found Eric's section. He used his ring to override the command in the simulation hub Eric belonged to, and then rushed to the boy to take off his sensors. The headband came off nicely, but in David's rush, he tangled the sensor cables. He cursed under his breath and squeezed the headband in his palm to free the fingers. And then it burned him. It was a moment of pain, shooting through his hand, then upwards his arm, before the nerves fried and left the skin numb. David screamed and dropped the headband on the floor. The lights dimmed, then went out completely. In the darkness, all the headbands glowed hot red. Every single one. It lasted mere seconds, but to David, time stopped, as the realization of what happened dawned on him. The lights returned, bringing the hall back to the semi-darkness. His hands were shaking. He barely managed to touch his ring to try and turn it on. He prayed the shock and the temperature did not destroy the device. Work! Work! Dad! Sabrina screamed on the other side. Dad, what is happening? Behind her, on the wall, the TV broadcast went silent as the people froze like gargoyles on the graveyard. The initiation counter did not stop as no one pressed the command. It was now displaying seconds in the negative. -31, -32, -33. Sabrina watched as Eric's headband slid out of her father's burned hand. Neither of them found a single word they could share, other than David's quiet, "I got Eric." Eric woke up in a crypt. David was here, for some reason, and he talked. Many words leaving his mouth, panicked, shocked. Eric couldn't understand many of them. Not anymore. Not after he heard these three. Everyone is dead. The cold air wasn't still here yet. It's been mere hours since people were simply falling asleep on these mats, since the machines were monitoring their life signs, not signaling the absence of heartbeats. He was dragged up to his feet. The floor wasn't stable, swaying back and forth. He had to lean on David to walk. But they had to walk, right now, right away. They were in a rush, so there was nowhere they needed to be. Yet they couldn't be here, among them, the dead. Everyone was dead. Eric followed David outside, to the light. 3 people stood in the middle of a large hall. One of them held out a ring displaying a hologram of a man with the Project Hope insignia, one of Lyra's 44 chosen. He stood there, facing the camera, and trying to explain that which could never be truly explained. There was a malfunction in the software. The second Hope launched, the headsets went haywire, and so everyone was dead. The light and the sounds helped Eric wake up, and little by little, he began to piece together some thoughts. The first one was a question. He stopped and forced David to look at him before he asked. "You knew?" David blinked, as if he needed a moment to process it, but then he did, and his face changed, adding 10 years to his features. "No, God, no," he said with crushing honesty. "Then why did you wake me up?" David raised his shoulders in a shrug that never fully happened. "I wanted to make up for being a fool." The man on the TV was joined by another, This one didn't look into the camera. His clothes were disheveled, his breath short, as if he'd run a mile. "I don't understand," he screamed. "We ran a multitude of large-scale tests. There was no chance for it to fail." "None of us understand." The first man lied. He did understand. Because even Eric understood. David grabbed him by the sleeve and pulled him towards the building's exit. "Come, we must get to Sabrina." The pavements were glistening, wet with fresh rain. Multiple sunbeams pierced the clouds and fell onto the silent city. It was huge. The towering buildings rising to the sky, empty. The cars sleeping on the curbs, waiting for people that would never go in them again, empty. The winding streets, too long, too plentiful to ever be full again. It had to be a nightmare. It couldn't be real. David tried to call a cab car, but none was in range, so they went down to the subway. A train should arrive, at some point. The tunnels were still lit, and the back walls welcomed the visitors with bursts of color of the illegal graffiti the city elected to ignore, too busy with more pressing matters. Or so they said. "Let go of your fears. Prepare for our new truth. Let us go and see our future. Hope." David grabbed Eric's wrist and squeezed it hard. "Eric, I don't want this to make sense to me." Eric fisted his hand and tried to dig the nails into his palm, but they were too short, freshly trimmed, incapable of bringing any pain, incapable of waking him up. Lyra did send her people to war. She told them of great purpose, promised a glorious victory and a healed world they could start to rebuild once they wake. Yet she knew, like many generals before her, that her soldiers would not be coming back home. An outcome both unbearable and unavoidable, because the promised world could not be saved with all of them in it. Not anymore. That battle had been forfeit several decades ago. And it was only that humans were, indeed, extraordinarily resilient in believing that things would be alright, that let them trust in their dream. Still, unlike the many leaders before her, Lyra didn't let her kin die in pain as the world burned around them. Her people died in hope. "I know," Eric responded to David in a whisper, as if the silence was something they ought to cherish. "And I hope it never truly will."